Welcome to the pod focusing on the aftermath and recovery from the devastating Palisades fires of January 2025. Journalist Joel Pollack, entrepreneur Oren Ezra, and technology expert Ron Goldschmidt serve up to the moment vital news and information, discuss the ongoing recovery efforts, and introduce us to the individuals and trades who are playing key roles in rebuilding our cherished communities. We're diving into the deep end and learning quickly how we can move forward together. We know the pain because we're living real-time news, stories, resources, and insights on the ongoing recovery effort. Buckle up. We're three homeless guys.
Welcome once again to Three Homeless Guys, the podcast about the Palisades fire and the rebuilding effort. I'm Joel Pollack here with my very good friends Oren Ezra and Ron Goldschmidt, and we have a very special guest on today's episode, Tracy Quinn of Heal the Bay, who's going to talk to us about the environmental impact of the fire. A bit of a change of pace on this episode for us, talking about the environment. We have mentioned it a little bit before, but now we're going to focus on it. It's of great interest to many people, and it's a good break, I think, from talking about debris, although I understand Oren has his usual debris report, so we'll get right into that. I want to start, first of all, by thanking all of the people who were involved in unveiling this incredible mural that now is opposite Palisades High. This was done by the incredible artists, and I want to make sure I get their names right. So there was a real joint effort here. First of all, the Molly Steinsaper Foundation was involved. Many other volunteers and groups from the community were involved as well. But the particular artist who I actually met, who worked on this, is a gentleman named Benjamin Suarez. And he painted this mural, and it commemorates the fire, but it also focuses on symbols of the Palisades community and Malibu, and it's just quite amazing. Oren, why don't you show that video so we can see it? I'll try to explain it as we go. But you see, it started there with lots of music, lots of people finishing touches. It started with the bobcat on the far left, which we talked about in the previous episode. That was the bobcat that I've seen up in the Temescal Canyon, where I'm not supposed to go, but I have been going to check out the wildlife and the shifting landscape up there. You know, I went right after the fire to see the fire damage, and then I went after the mudslides had completely obliterated the trail and changed the shape of the canyon. So that was interesting. But remember, I had that photograph of the bobcat that was really not looking so well, was starving, in fact. And that photograph made the rounds, and it now made it into the mural. Oh, you still have that. There you go. Wow. Yeah, there it is. I almost stumbled on it. That was at the top of the trail near the waterfall. And I just stumbled on it, and it was quite incredible. And that led to a broader effort to try to rescue as many animals as could be rescued. It's very difficult. I think many of the animals have left, if they can, to go to places where there are actually other animals to eat, and there's more green to eat if you're a herbivore. So that triggered a broader effort, and that effort continues. And we're going to hear from Tracy in a minute about what's happening to the wildlife, both on the land and the sea. But I wanted to show you what I found in the canyon today, actually. I went back in to see what was going on. Not much has changed. There are some green shoots everywhere and so forth. But I saw some reptiles for the first time. At least I think they're reptiles. At first I thought they were amphibians. I thought they were salamanders. But a lot of these little guys raised to the canyon, basically pretty devastated. The water's still running through it. And look at that. Well, about a half dozen of those guys. And the iPhone has this nifty feature where you can look at species and pictures of animals. That apparently is a California newt, and they grow 6 to 8 inches long, and they are considered toxic, so you don't really want to touch them because they secrete a toxin through their skins, and they have it in their internal organs to deter predators. But there they are. They are coming back to the canyon, so something is returning to life. Not edible, perhaps, for other animals, but it is coming back. And I have some other updates about insurance. My public adjuster, who we talked about last time we talked with a public adjuster. My public adjuster came to my house and found there was roof damage after all. So now we have another complaint, another issue to deal with. But anyway, that's it for news for me. I'm going to throw it to Oren for the debris report.
So yeah, we're more or less at the same point. We're still waiting for the excavators to go on ground and starting removing the debris. What we did find out is another thing while we were talking in the last week. We were talking to the insurance, and I was just talking to a couple of my neighbors yesterday that went through the Woolsey fire. And they told me that after they use the Army Corps, they end up getting like a bill of $120,000. So thanks God they're both lawyers and like they were very lucky and they saved all their receipts. So they were able to argue about this price and take it down just for the limitation of how much they had on their policy. And they also used some of the money to remove some trees and stuff like this. So they paid like the county, or I think it was Malibu City. They paid Malibu City only like the amount that have left. But what we found out, so for instance, people need to like really know how to read their policy. If my policy says that I have on my dwelling $1 million and I have 5% of debris removal, right? You read it as like, okay, you have $50,000 to remove the debris. It's not exactly like this because I will get this $50,000 only after I reach the $1 million of dwelling A. So if the insurance is giving me only $800,000 in a year from today, and I'm getting the bill and it didn't finish the to build the house, and I'm still arguing with the insurance on this $200,000, the insurance might go ahead and pay the county, I don't know, whatever they will invoice, maybe like $200,000, maybe it's $300,000. We have no idea, no way to know. So one of the things I'm talking to the people at Lindsay Horvath office is, listen, we have few more days to decide, and everybody has few more days to decide. Why don't you tell us, hey, if you had a 2,000 square foot home, more or less you're going to pay this amount, that amount. So this is still not clear. Hopefully it will be cleared in the next few days. That's one thing. The other thing, I'm hearing and seeing more and more the difference between the way the Army Corps of Engineers are working and the way our contractors are working. And me and Ron have been driving to the neighborhood, and in our neighborhood in Sunset Mesa, there is few areas that are being cleared. Now, if you just want to see the difference between the Army Corps of Engineers and to see like a private contractor working on a landfill, it's very easy to see. Because when it's a private contractor, you see like 2, 3, 4 people working. And if it's the Army Corps of Engineers, you see like 10, 15, 20 people. Like 2 or 3 of them are working, the rest are standing over there. And I promise you guys that we're paying for it. We're paying for each and every person that is sitting over there and not working. I don't know why they need like so many people. Another thing I noticed is that when the Army Corps of Engineer remove the debris, what they do, they just take everything all together, put it in a truck. Okay, they put the debris in like this little thing that they need to do, but other than that, they don't take the metals and put them aside, and the dirt and put it aside, and the concrete and put it aside, like the regular contractors are doing. So there is like so many things, and this is just like a very short list. I'll probably work this week with some of the guys on a list, some of the guys that I know that are removing the debris on a list, and I can present it next week. But again, I honestly don't understand it. Why?
So I found out something about that actually. So I'm not the debris guy, but they are actually separating the concrete and the steel. They're not doing it there. So we all have been talking a little bit, and this may get into some of Tracy's area as well, but we're all talking about what's happening to the water on the road in Temescal Canyon Road. We know it was closed. There was a sinkhole, or they called it a sinkhole. It was really sort of a flood. But there was water that rose to the surface of the road, caused some damage, and they had geologists and engineers repairing it. They are still there. But at the same time, the Army Corps of Engineers opened a facility. Remember, we had a guest on who was talking about setting up a concrete recycling plant on a quarter acre of land if he could find one. That's what they've done. They've actually set up this facility in Temescal Canyon, on Temescal Canyon Road, not in the park, but on the road downhill from the high school, where the debris trucks line up when they're full, and they go in there and they separate out the metal and the concrete, and they crush the concrete and they recycle it, and then they set the metal aside, and I guess they take it to a scrap facility where it's also reused or recycled. So they're doing that. They just didn't tell anyone they were doing it. I mean, they really, it's sort of not spoken about. I don't know why, but I got in there because I went with Congressman Doug LaMalfa, who was visiting, and the Army Corps took him through. You can't just go down Temescal Canyon Road. So I don't know what the environmental impact of that is going to be. Maybe Tracy can tell us, but they are actually crushing concrete and separating steel on Temescal Canyon Road. So, Oren, it is happening, and I don't know if it's happening to all the debris, but it is happening to some of it.
It's happening only to the debris that is coming out from for the Army Corps of Engineers. My question is, what's happening with our contractors, with the people from our community that are trying to make a living over here, and they're going through all these hoops that we mentioned already, and extra regulation that the Army Corps of Engineers is not going through. That's one thing. The second thing is, why does the Army Corps of Engineers is not doing asbestos testing? Why
They're
only
testing the concrete. Apparently, they told me they're doing chip testing of the concrete, but they're not doing it generally. Right.
Yeah. So, like, I'm saying, like, there is one rule for the Army Corps of Engineers, and there is one rule for the regular contractors. Then the third thing is like we talked about already. Like, why do they need this hazard license? Why do I need to pay another 10% for somebody just to sign my permit in order to the company that we hired to remove the debris? So there is all of these things that still and again, the reason why I'm concentrating on the debris removal, because there is so many things over here that are not getting solved. And for me, just like the beginning, right? We're at the beginning of a marathon. It's not something that's ending up very soon.
Of course. Also, the great irony is that, as we have regulations that are trying to, detect infinitesimal levels of asbestos on private debris removal, we have the entire PCH seeping crap into the ocean, completely, with very, very little progress. And that's the thing that I want to point out, which is the great dichotomy between what's happening, like a great detailed, kind of like plan to get folks to clean the debris, at the same time, complete ignorance of like a massive ecological disaster where there's 200 homes on PCH. And I think people from outside the community don't understand what is happening on PCH because they haven't been there, where this massive level of an ecological, disaster, I wouldn't call it anything else. And I'm sure Tracy can talk to us about this, but I just don't understand the logic behind not having consistent rules.
So can I introduce Tracy Quinn at this point?
Yeah.
I think we want to bring her in to enlighten us about the environmental impact of the fires. Let me just give you a brief bit of background about her. She is the president and CEO of Heal the Bay, which is a well-known organization in the Santa Monica Bay area. I knew about it even before I moved to Pacific Palisades because I lived in Santa Monica for 8 years. And she has many degrees, Bachelor of Science and Masters of Engineering in Agricultural and Biological Engineering from Cornell University. She's a licensed civil engineer in California, and she designed water infrastructure, which is one of my favorite topics, actually, Tracy. So I have some water questions for you, maybe not for this episode, but we should talk about it. And she also served as the Director of California Urban Water Policy at the Natural Resources Defense Council. Really just an incredible amount of expertise here. We're very privileged to have you on our show, and you were recommended by people in the community who said, hey, you need to talk to Tracy Quinn. She is doing all this testing and studying, and she can tell you exactly what's going on. So welcome to Three Homeless Guys, Tracy.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to meet you all and be here.
All right, so just tell us about Heal the Bay, first of all, a great organization that has really helped clean up our coastal waters here in the Santa Monica Bay area.
Sure. Heal the Bay we're celebrating our 40th anniversary this year. And our mission is to protect and restore the coastal waters of greater Los Angeles. We use science and policy, community engagement and education. And, we're founded when the Hyperion treatment plant was discharging partially treated sewage into the Santa Monica Bay. Lifeguards were getting sick. There was a dead zone that was created. Surfers never reported seeing dolphins, and we were able to take legal action against the city of Los Angeles, get them to make improvements at that plant. And now, at least prior to the fires, I would say you can't go a day at the beach without seeing a pod of dolphins swim by. And so the evidence of the work of this organization is borne out in the health, the improvement in our bay. So,
Well, we are still seeing some dolphins swim by, although I know people are very concerned about what's happening in the water right now. But I want to share this video, Oren, if you have that video. This is a video I took on January 31st, so just a few weeks after the fire. I was in Malibu. This is along PCH, and I was surprised to see dolphins swimming right along the coast, just maybe 20 yards from the debris and the mess and whatever toxins were entering the water. But this video was actually taken through the window of a destroyed car, and there you can see the dolphins playing just off the coast there. And I did a few of those. This was one of my favorite ones because you can see them jumping and doing all sorts of things. And it was a symbol of nature returning to the scene of this devastation. But of course, that's not the end of the story, because as Ron pointed out, the debris is still there and we don't know what's happening to our oceans. So Tracy, tell us what is happening to the oceans.
well, this is a really tough question. You'd think it would be a lot easier to answer. We've done quite a bit of testing, but the impact of this unprecedented disaster on our oceans is really unknown. There are a number of contaminants that we would expect to see after, nearly 7,000 structures near the coast burned, and many of them do not have human health standards or marine health standards. They haven't been studied in this context, and so it's going to be really challenging, both in the near term and long term, to understand the real impacts of this fire. We went out and did some testing. It was unclear at the very beginning. We test for bacteria all the time. The Department of Public Health tests for bacteria. That's generally the number one indicator of whether or not you're going to get sick if you go swimming. But we needed to test for a number of other contaminants, and it wasn't clear if Department of Public Health was getting out there. So we got permission. We got escorted into the burn zone, and we took water quality sampling in January, north of the burn zone, within the burn zone, and then as far south as Malaga Cove. We did that before the first rains in January, and then again afterwards, to understand sort of the impacts of the deposition of ash and the homes that are along the coast, and then really understanding the debris flow that came from that first flush storm and what those impacts were along our coast. One of the other challenges with this is that it takes a long time to get that data back. Some of the contaminants that we're looking at can take 3 to 10 days. Others take several weeks to get back. And so we're not getting real-time data. We took our data in the end of January, and we didn't get our data back from the labs until early March. And so this is providing a really big challenge in understanding what the impacts are. I can say, based on our data in January, which again just provides a snapshot of that period, that we are seeing contamination above human health standards for things like polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. You might see it more frequently just with the acronym PAHs, and surprisingly with beryllium, which is a contaminant that we tested for, but the Department of Public Health did not. And then we're seeing contamination levels exceeding marine health limits for a number of heavy metals. As you would expect, and I think with Oren's report, a lot of the contamination is right off of Big Rock, where we have a lot of those homes where the footprint of those homes and now that debris is within the high tide line. So every day that tide is washing into that debris and washing that back out into the ocean. I'll stop there, but there's a lot more to report, but I'll stop there for a moment.
That's Big Rock in the southern portion of Malibu, right?
Yes.
Amazing. And there was some public outrage in the beginning when people were told that all kinds of barriers were being put up to prevent runoff into the ocean, and then people walked along the beach during some of the rain and they saw debris, they saw soot, they saw pieces of wood, they saw other things, and they said, nothing's being stopped. We were lied to. All of this is still washing out to the ocean. Do you know what happened there?
Yeah, I was actually given the opportunity to be a part of the conversations of the multi-agency task force ahead of the storm. So I was sitting in with California Office of Emergency Services, LA County Public Works, LA Sanitation as they prepared for these storms. And then I went out and drove a lot of these areas to look at the interventions they put in place. I think it can never be as extensive as we want it to be. There was a lot that was done. K-rails were put up. I think the primary concern was really around mudslides and debris flow. So a lot of the efforts went to things that were going to prevent property damage. But then there were also a lot of things deployed, like filtration socks around storm drains to keep some of those contaminants out. And while we did see a lot of debris, and we have continued to see a lot of debris washing up on our shores, I think I've been really surprised that the water quality wasn't as bad as we could have expected. We tested over 116 contaminants, and only 2 of them exceeded human health standards. A lot of the things that we expected to see in really high concentrations just weren't there. And so I think that the measures that were put in place were to some degree successful. Obviously not 100% because we're still seeing objects and glass and other things wash through our storm drain system and back up on our beaches. But yeah, I was pretty surprised at how effective their strategy seemed to be, at least what we're seeing in the water quality data.
All right,
Is there
so
any evidence
go
of
ahead.
like any fish or any like anything from the ocean that have been, because I've seen like couple of videos on X and on other places of like dolphins that came to the shore like dead fish and dead birds and stuff like this.
Yeah.
But I don't know, like is there any evidence to it for it and like
I'm really glad you brought up the horrific scene that we're seeing on a lot of our beaches with injured and dead marine animals. We've just had this massive fire, but we are also in the middle of a domoic acid outbreak. This is something that has happened for the last 4 years. The primary cause is a warming of the oceans and nutrients. So it follows high wind events. The winds will sweep across our oceans, and you'll get sort of an upswell of nutrients that will cause a harmful algal bloom, and then that will lead to a domoic acid outbreak. We cannot rule out that the fires impacted the harmful algal bloom. There were, nutrients that were flowing into the ocean after the fires. But at this point, we also can't say that there's more than sort of that correlation there. Domoic acid outbreaks are unfortunately common, and we expect to see more and more of them as our oceans continue to warm.
I want to just stress that point because I've seen this happen before. So people were looking at the oceans carefully now after the fire, and they were seeing sick seals and dolphins. And in fact, the Daily Mail here has an article from last week where the headline is "Dead Dolphins and Seals Watch Up on LA Beaches as officials face blame for toxic tide of wildfire debris." So they don't really connect them in a causal way in the headline, but the implication is certainly there that the runoff, the debris from the fire, is causing these sick seals and dolphins to wash up on beaches. But I've actually seen it before. A few years ago, I was walking on the beach with one of my kids, and a seal came out of the ocean and just started waddling toward us and behaving very strangely. So at first we thought it was really cool. Hey, here's a seal. And then we realized there was something wrong with this animal. So we called an animal rescue agency. I forget which one it was, but they came and they said, no, this seal is sick. It probably ate some shellfish that was contaminated. And apparently all over California, they have to cancel certain fishing seasons when this kind of algae is present in the water that I guess concentrates or the shellfish concentrate the toxin that the algae produces. And then animals that eat the shellfish then end up getting really sick. And it's not necessarily connected to the fire. It could be, but those two things could also be independent.
Yeah, we saw a really bad domoic acid outbreak last year as well, and obviously we didn't have fires then. I think it's really important if you do see animals that are sick. Domoic acid can act like like they've been on acid, the recreational drug. It affects their brains. The animals can become aggressive, and so we recommend that you call the Marine Mammal Care Center. Their information is easily available. They have the expertise to come out and to treat animals, and if they're passed away to take care of the animals and perform necropsies if it's appropriate. But that's an important agency we're really lucky to have here in Southern California.
So, are there studies you can do to try to find out whether it's a causal relationship, whether the fire debris is causing this bloom?
I think academic institutions are looking into that and trying to better understand it. I was in a conversation with a professor from USC today who specializes in the marine microbiome and is looking into a lot of these issues. It's going to be really challenging to show causation here. I think, with the fact that we see domoic acid outbreaks regularly, it would be really hard to really understand the impact of the fires on this outbreak.
We're talking about two issues here, which is one, the water contamination from the overall disaster, and number two is the issue of the houses directly on PCH, which I understand is about 195 houses along stretches of miles of PCH, which really haven't been cleared yet. I understand, or at least that was the indication when Lindsay Horvath was on the show, that they're waiting for clearance from the homeowners in order to know how to pursue with clearing that debris, just like everything else. But to me, just as a common sense, I don't understand the exact impact of those homes. It seems to me like that's a terrible thing that's happening, and we should be clearing that as fast as possible on first priority. To me, since those houses, share assets with the state, which is the beach, those houses should be first priority to get them out immediately right after the disaster. I don't think we should be waiting 2.5 months in for those houses to be cleared. Am I crazy, or does that not make sense, Tracy?
No, you are absolutely correct. The biggest threat to our ocean water quality right now is those homes that are sitting on the beach in that high tide zone. Every hazardous and harmful chemical, every piece of metal, all of that is washing directly into our ocean. I had conversations with Colonel Saucer from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. I would say he's been really helpful in answering a lot of my questions, both before they started operations and now. We initially spoke about the locations that they were going to choose for their staging and sorting operations, and now have been speaking more about how they're prioritizing cleanup. When I spoke to him, he said that it is part of their mission to prioritize environmentally sensitive areas, but it is, they are kind of given the approved ROEs where they can process that. And my understanding is that those properties, the ROEs, have not been processed, so the U.S. Army Corps can't access those sites. I've also reached out to the County Public Works, who are overseeing the ROE processing, and expressed our concern about these properties and demanded that they prioritize those, and even helped the county get in touch with some of those homeowners. I think a lot of people share the concerns that you all have expressed with that area of PCH, and we've had folks reach out to us and offer the contact information for those homeowners, so we made sure the county got it. And my understanding is that things are starting to move there, but obviously not as fast as we all want to see happen.
Yeah, I did start. I did drive through there this week, and I did see that they started to move. But like again, I think that like the amount of debris that have been washed over there into the ocean in the last 2.5 months. Like I just did a calculation. If they have 30 teams, that each team would like start working on PCH, at least clearing the properties that they were able to contact the owners, and even offer them, tell them, hey, those one here, we're like signing you guys are not being charged for anything. We're removing everything. We'll do everything you ask, but this can cause like we're saying we don't know, but it might, and I'm sure it will. Basically, like this amount of debris washing into the oceans. I don't understand why they didn't take like 30 teams. 30 teams can finish all these 190 houses in a month and finish it before the storm. Those are the things that like I'm looking at and I'm like, where's the efficiency? Where like
Where's the common sense? Where's the common sense? What should have happened is that those folks that have the houses on the ocean didn't have 2 months to opt in. They should have had 2 weeks to opt in, and then we would have had our answers. But because there's no, in my opinion, common sense, and everybody's just treated with the same broad stroke. We're treating everybody the same. But the reality is like it's a disaster. We have to make decisions in real time, and in my opinion, that should have been first priority. There's no doubt that those houses are causing like a big disaster. And I'm not like a big environmentalist where I'm like, shouting from the rooftops every time there's a disaster. But it's plain as day that is not good. Okay, like to anybody that's living in the Palisades or Malibu, and for anybody that's not seeing it, there's not much activity in the last 10 weeks, and it should have happened right away. They should have given those homes 2 weeks or a week to opt in or opt out, and they should have gone to work on those lots right away. Now we're going to be like, we're 10 weeks in, we're just starting work, damage has been done. I don't even think that the right way to clear that debris from the road, I've said it many times, I think there should be a barge set up off in the ocean and for the clearance to actually take place from the ocean. I think it'll be a lot faster, better for the environment even. And I just don't, again, like it's one of those things, like I just don't see any common sense. It's everything being treated the same way. And it's not the same thing. It's like we just need fast decisions, people in charge. And I have a feeling it's multiple agencies that are tripping over each other without being able to come to a decision.
Well, that could be. I want to ask Tracy about some of the problems you alluded to, Ron. So, Tracy, you've talked about presence of certain chemicals, certain minerals, heavy metals, toxins. What about physical debris? Because some of the things coming from those homes that are right on the beach, or even things washing out through the various different drainages, I'm sure will end up on the ocean floor or perhaps even floating around. They could pose hazards to swimmers, to divers. We don't have that many divers. It's pretty cold water, but surfers. I mean, you can imagine wading in with your kids and there's some jagged piece of somebody's house that somehow washes up and you step on it, or a child steps on it, God forbid. But is that going to be something that's of concern, and how can they remove those physical dangers from the shoreline?
That is one of the things that we are really worried about. I think a lot of the focus early on has been on the potential for chemical hazards, for the types of pollutants that we've been looking into. But the physical hazards are also a real danger. I think, we've seen reports of broken glass, nails, or pieces of wood with nails sticking out. We just don't know what is under the water. Heal the Bay is currently doing a fundraising campaign. We have found a group of divers that have experience in diving in contaminated waters that have volunteered their services. And we want to go get a boat and take them out and do some dives to not only observe what is happening underwater, but to also collect some offshore water quality samples to really understand a little bit more of what's happening off of our shores, particularly in the areas off of Malibu around Big Rock and where we're seeing that debris pooling offshore. So if any of your listeners want to support that work, I think it's something that's really needed so that we can really understand what issues we're facing and what the real risks are. I think, the good news is, based on some of the conversations that we've had, a lot of that stuff is heavier, so it's not going to travel too far south from where it comes out from the site. So it's not as though we're seeing the nails and screws and glass washing up in Dockweiler or the South Bay or even in Venice. But we are seeing, we are going to see that near our outfalls. So, a lot near Rustic Canyon where A big part of that watershed is burned structures, and a lot of that debris is coming out through Rustic Canyon and then along the shores where those homes burned along Malibu. So more investigation needs to be done. I think in the meantime, we'll want to recommend folks to take their families further south.
How far south do you have to go? This was actually a debate that I was having with someone because my daughter does the junior lifeguard program, and we're thinking, okay, Santa Monica doesn't sound too good. Will Rogers doesn't look too good. How far south do you have to go to be sure that you're safe? What's that?
Or north.
Or
Yeah.
north? Yeah.
There's two factors to consider. There's the sand and sediment data. What's going on with the dry sand where, people are playing beach volleyball and doing a lot of activities. And then there's the water quality. So, again, this is based on January data that was collected in January for the water. You would expect that the heaviest pollutant load would happen around Big Rock and then around Rustic Canyon outfall, and then it would improve as you go south. What we saw that was surprising were spikes at Santa Monica Pier and at Dockweiler. And then no data was collected between Dockweiler and Malaga Cove. And then at Malaga Cove, there were very few impacts or signs of fire pollutants there. So I think we need more data to understand the trends. We have now access to data from February 6th and February 18th. That we'll be analyzing this week to kind of hopefully understand some trends and get a better sense of what's going on in the water now. And we've partnered with USC and done some training with their scientists. They've taken over weekly water quality sampling, and we expect to get that water quality data. We'll have much better information in a couple of weeks. And then with the sand, the Department of Public Health and the Regional Water Quality Control Board have some initial data. It's really just the metals. We don't have PAHs or PCBs yet, but they're just looking at the trend lines. There are some impacts in the dry sand north of the fire area, which makes sense because the wind was blowing north, so you probably got some ash deposition. We have big spikes within the burn zone, so that sand is pretty highly contaminated, or at least more so than the other beaches. And then you see a decline as you move south. So it looks like south of about Montana Ave, there are very few fire-related contaminants. We're still looking at that data to understand how the data compares to human health standards. Our preliminary review shows that it's looking okay. There may be some issues with arsenic, but that could be background levels as well.
How do you treat the sediment problem on the sand? Do they go through and clean it somehow or filter it? I mean, we see the big tractors on the beach in the morning sometimes, but how do you actually get the contamination out of something that's on land already?
Yeah, I think in the areas within the burn zone where we're seeing the higher levels, if those levels prove to be above human health standards, then they would likely have to consider removing some of that sand and replacing it. They may do that as part of the debris removal that's happening in a lot of that burn area, just like in the inland areas where they're removing 6 inches of soil. I think we are at least assuming that they would be removing about 6 inches of sand from that, but that hasn't been confirmed. And then in others outside of the debris fields, there could potentially be sand, removal and replacement. We already have a significant erosion problem with our sand. We already have a very expensive sand replacement program in Los Angeles County to stave off that erosion and protect things like PCH, and also make sure we have big sandy beaches for the folks that live here and the millions of people that visit.
I thought it was all natural. I thought it was all natural, those big sandy beaches.
I mean, they are natural. They were natural, but some of the interventions that we've done along our creeks have slowed down that natural replacement that would have happened. So we have to intervene and help the process a little bit. So that's part of what our County Department of Beaches and Harbors does, is help replenish our beaches.
Can Heal the Bay impact like the cleanup schedule, or is that outside of your jurisdiction?
What do you mean with the cleanup schedule?
Like I'm hearing a lot about testing, and I think it's all great, and I think like it's wonderful, but I think the number one thing we could do is actually clean the debris. And I'm still stuck on the idea of like, why aren't we doing that? Instead of doing the testing, why aren't we just cleaning? And then we can do the testing. So
I mean, we need to do both, but you're right. The number one priority is removing the debris. And, I myself as an advocate and my team of advocates is pushing our, the county and U.S. Army Corps to move faster to remove that debris.
So tell us as an insider, like, where's the holdup? Because we don't know. I'm dying to know, like, we've been sitting here and I drive through PCH every day and I still see the same houses largely like seeping stuff into the ocean. Like what is the holdup? Like give us the inside baseball.
I mean, that's tough. I don't know that I have a whole lot of inside baseball information. The information that I was given is that the right of entry forms were not turned in for a lot of those properties. So there was no response, no opt-in, no opt-out. And so, a lot of time has been spent trying to contact those homeowners to understand what they're planning to do, and that there's been some traction recently, but that was my understanding of the holdup is really the right of entry process.
Ron, there was a video that went around of Mayor Karen Bass saying that if you don't opt in or opt out and you don't remove your own debris, we may declare your property a nuisance and you may be subject to fines and that sort of thing. And people were attacking the mayor for saying that. And I've been pretty critical of the mayor, but I thought that was actually the right message, because if you're not going to decide, like you said, Ron, if you're going to hold up everybody else who needs to rebuild and needs to clean up, something needs to be done. I mean, somebody eventually needs to say, hey, there's going to be a penalty if you don't help us clean up. We all have to clean up or we can't rebuild. So
in particularly those houses on PCH. Like, to me, I'm not a lawyer. You are, Joel. Maybe you can tell me, is that an eminent domain kind of like situation where the state can say, hey, you know what? The state owns this beach as well. The people own the beach. You have to opt in or opt out faster. Tell us what to do, because otherwise we're just going to go through and just clean it up. To me, that
condemn the property, I guess. But
that would have been the common sense to do it. Like, if I was in charge, that's what I would have done. I'm just saying.
97% or 80% of everybody opt in, right? That's what that's the number I keep on hearing from every.
I think it's of those who respond, it's like 96% opt in. But then they're still looking apparently for 1,000 property owners. So I guess 1,000 out of, if you think about Palisades and Malibu, 7,000 structures, let's say, were affected. So then, if they're still looking for 1,000 people to respond, that's basically about 14%.
But we're only looking for the 195 on PCH,
right?
The one that we share the beach with, the one that the state owns the beach. Those are the ones that should be first priority. To me, it's like glaringly obvious that that's the number one priority, is to clean those up. Everything else, it's gonna take a long time. We all know that. Let the process run its course. It's not perfect. We all know that, but that's like the first priority. Like that's happening, and it's 195. You can call them up in one day. What are you doing? Like, are you opting in, opting out? And then to me, it was just another look. We weren't prepared for the fires, and we weren't prepared for this. So clearly, the policy is being put in place as we go through this. I get it, and unprecedented and all that stuff, but we're 10 weeks in. And I think those houses should have been first priority. People should have been on the phones first week saying, what are you doing? You want to do it yourself? You got to clean it up in 2 weeks. You don't want to do it? We'll do it in the next 2 weeks. And that would have averted all of, a lot of the issues. Like, it's just common sense. I just go back to that, and I just see it lacking on so many levels at every government level right now.
Tracy,
I'm curious if you all think. I'm going to ask the question. I'm not on your mind.
Please, no, go for it.
I'm curious if you think that the fact that a lot of those homes, at least some of those homes, were not primary residences. I think that people were maybe more responsive if it was their primary residence than if it was a vacation home or unoccupied, and if that might be impacting some of the delay or, finding the contact information for those folks if they weren't being proactive. But I wanted, that being said, I fully agree with your frustration and your enthusiasm for um, saying that we could have and should have done better, and there's still room to do better. I would love to see some of those marches and some of those impassioned social media posts directed at this cause, and expediting the removal of the debris, because I think that is the number one thing we can do to protect our oceans and start moving towards restoration, is getting that debris off those beaches. So I'm really happy to hear that it's been a huge focus of this podcast, because I think it really is that important for the health of our coastline. And I know for many of us who choose to live in Southern California, the ocean and the beach is a large part of what makes living here so special. And we, obviously I've chosen this as my career. I think that, protecting it is really important.
Tracy, I want to ask you a couple more
what's
questions.
the
Oh, go
root
ahead,
of
Oren,
the
and then I've got two more about the beach. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
do you know what's the root of the debris will be? Like, there is a debris right now. We drive on PCH, we see it sit on the water. But what's going to happen with it if nobody is cleaning it? If nobody is like out there, like even the debris that is on the ocean, is there any ways to clean it, to bring like some sort of like I don't know, like a huge tanker that can filter the water or something like that? Is there any solutions like this?
Cleaning water once it's in the ocean, particularly for the contaminants that we're seeing, I think would be really challenging. It's not like an oil spill. I've heard a couple times a comparison. We have to treat this like an oil spill, but oil sits on top of the water, and the cleanup, the remediation of an oil spill is very different than one where you're having contaminants that can mix with the water and are going to be at all levels throughout the water zone. So this just represents a much more challenging situation. Once the debris is removed, and once it stops raining and debris from inland stops reaching our coast, the ocean for a lot of these things can start to heal itself. There's a natural mixing and dilution that happens with the ocean, and so for some of these things, the ocean will heal itself over time. But we need to stop inputting pollutants to the ocean. So the debris needs to go.
Let me ask you about some debris again, and that is a unique kind of debris, the hazardous materials that the EPA was removing in phase one of the debris removal. There was a lot of concern among residents that they were using a parking lot. I think it was at Will Rogers State Beach. And I asked Lee Zeldin, the administrator of the EPA, when he was in town about that. And he gave a very diplomatic answer, which was, "We're here to help. We're here to help." And I like Lee Zeldin, but it wasn't really an answer. And he was new on the job. I think he had just been confirmed, so maybe he didn't really know what to say. But what is happening with those sites, and were people right to be concerned? Because people were really worried that material too hazardous to be on our lots was suddenly going to be on a beach parking lot.
Yeah, so the first location that was selected by EPA and FEMA, or was, I would say, used, I don't know that they were part of the selection process per se, was Topanga Creek. So the area formerly occupied by Rosenthal Wines and the Real Inn. And that was extremely concerning for a number of reasons. One, its location right next to Topanga Creek, and a very popular surf zone. And the fact that operation began before the public was made aware of it. I think, some of the thinking behind it was that it made sense logistically. It met a lot of the basic requirements for a large flat area with a road access. The EPA has done this in previous fires. They do testing. They'll say, we test the soil before, we test the soil after, and we've never seen impacts. I think, and for them, I think a lot of the PR was, and this is an area that already burned. But I think the community was rightly enraged by this. I think this is an area that is both culturally and ecologically sensitive. It's a very popular location. Um, the creek is home to endangered species. And largely the watershed that burned upstream of the Topanga Creek was wildfire area. So unlikely to have a number of hazardous waste coming through that area. And I think when we observed, initially when we heard of this site, we, demanded to meet with the EPA. We were able to have a conversation with them. We shared our concerns about the location of this site. Um, and we asked to be able to do a tour to understand the types of mitigation measures they were putting in place to ensure pollutants weren't going to leave the site. They granted us that opportunity. Actually, Supervisor Horvath got us into the location for a tour with EPA and FEMA officials. We observed the types of BMPs that they had put in place to prevent run-on. It was clear that they didn't fully understand the history of that location and the frequency with which it can flood. And so we made some we fought to get it moved. We thought it made a lot more sense to do a site like that within the burn zone, somewhere in the Palisades that had already burned. It had already been exposed to a lot of these hazardous contaminants. We were unsuccessful in that advocacy, but we were successful in getting them to improve the best management practices, to move further away from the creek, and to do some other things that help to reduce the likelihood that pollutants would leave. And I think, we were also encouraged by early messaging that this would only be for a month, that they had 30 days to do that phase 1 cleanup. As you noted, they also, this was not enough room for them. They also expanded to Will Rogers, which was another area that people were concerned about. Although they were doing it on the parking lot and there was, a big distance to the ocean, that Sandy Beach is a place where junior lifeguards and, other children's activities happen during the summer, and people really wanted to make sure those hazardous wastes didn't leave. They did close Will Rogers at the end of February, but operations, to my understanding, do continue at Topanga Creek for hazardous materials that are found during phase 2 with the U.S. Army Corps' debris removal.
So
Is there
this
any
is.
place that
Oh, go ahead, Oren.
that we
Yeah.
can see any test results or anything that you guys are testing in the water that is like I want to go with my kids to the beach this weekend. Is there any place I can go and see like which beach is safe or not?
Yeah, we're publishing our water quality data tomorrow. So you'll get a pretty clear picture of, again, that snapshot in January. And then we'll be updating it with some February data, hopefully later this week. And then we will also be providing some information on what's going on with the sand, with some of the early sand and sediment testing. So our website is a good place to get information, and we update on our social accounts as well. So that's a good place to know when there's an update to our website, to follow us at Heal the Bay on Instagram. We also have Facebook, TikTok, all the things, but Instagram I think is sort of the easiest place to get that information.
So let me ask you about the creeks. You mentioned the waterways that lead into the ocean. So I've been doing a lot of exploration there, and it's been really interesting to see some of the changes. First of all, in the trails, you've had mudslides that have changed everything, and a lot of the vegetation is gone. We spoke about the animals earlier. One of the really interesting things happening is that the LA County Department of Public Works is going into Topanga Canyon, and they're actually dredging out some of the dams that were built, I don't know how many years ago, 40, 50 years ago, that were there to stop debris from going into the waterways and have been completely silted over. I don't know who was responsible for allowing that, because I was told by county workers that they only had the authority to do this a few years ago, and they were also shocked. They told me that the city was in charge for a while and the city neglected it. So I don't know who's really to blame, but basically they excavated down about 20 feet behind these dams to expose these intake cylinders that I had never seen before in years of hiking there, but now apparently they're visible now, but they were supposed to be there, or they were supposed to be visible, just they had been silted over. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that. I mean, are you concerned about what's happening in the creek systems, and how does that play a role downstream once it hits the ocean?
Well, I'm certainly concerned about contaminants entering the creek systems. I think that um, you know, the creeks in Malibu Creek, Topanga Creek, these are, really special and sensitive ecological areas. Um, the sediment is a little bit outside of what we do at Heal the Bay. I think I probably know just enough to be dangerous, but uh, there's, you know, this is kind of speaks to a little bit of what I was talking about with the sand erosion issues, is that, our creeks provided new sediment that, turned into sand and replenished our beaches historically. And so the fact that we've put dams up has stopped that natural process, and now we have to sort of manually overcome for that. So we have to dredge some of those creeks to get sediment that can be used to replenish our beaches, so that they don't fully erode. I think that this is a process that county beaches and harbors is working on in the long term as they think about what the impacts of sea level rise will be. But I think I don't have the expertise to weigh in on some of the operations that they're doing post fire and what that might mean for the environment.
I mean, I had two concerns. One is that if you have sediments at the base of a dam, I understand this isn't like a traditional dam of a river, because it has areas where the water is supposed to flow through, and it's not collecting the water. But often at the bottom of these dams is when you get the heavy metals. Over many, many years, most dams will have contaminants and heavy metals at the base of the dam. So they're dredging it up. I'm not sure they're testing it. If you tell me they're using that for the beaches, that makes me concerned, because I don't know what's in there. And the other concern I have is that, and this is sort of funny, and I like the guys who are working on this. This is not meant in any way to be negative about them, but the first thing they tell me when I'm there is, hey, you're not supposed to be here. And then the next thing they say is, hey, you've been coming here for a while. Can you show us pictures on your cell phone of what this creek used to look like? Because we're not sure where the water is supposed to go. And I say, well, it's not supposed to go anywhere. It goes where it goes. And they say, yeah, whatever. Where did it go before? And so I show them. But to me, it's a little interesting because they're dredging these creeks and trying to shape, or dredging the dams, not the creeks, but they're trying to shape the flow of the water. But there hasn't been much consultation with people who know how these systems work. So now I'm the water authority. Sort of, I'm trying to say, well, this is where it went and this is how it flowed. But that's a little scary to me because I'm not an expert. I mean, I have a little bit of knowledge, but these plans are going ahead to do this dredging without a huge amount of forethought about what's actually supposed to happen in this kind of ecosystem. And like Ron, I'm not shouting from the rooftops about a pristine environment and that kind of thing. But I do think sometimes you need to have some knowledge before you make changes to the landscape, because if you don't, then the changes are usually undone, or they can actually make the problem worse.
Yeah, I know. I think that report is concerning. Do you know if it was, which county agency it was that was?
It was Public Works. I mean, and again, I think the people there were well-intentioned, and I think they did a good job of dredging and clearing out the dams and so forth. But they told me, for example, one guy told me that the water was supposed to flow along the south side of the canyon toward a dam that had been built on the south side. But anyone who had hiked that canyon in the last 5 years knew that during a rainy season, the water flowed on the north side of the canyon, not on the south side. And it took a sort of circuitous route. And eventually it did end up at the dam, but it didn't flow where it was, quote unquote, supposed to flow. So, it's not supposed to flow anywhere. Again, it just goes where it goes. Water follows gravity. So I was a little concerned about that. I don't know if it really means anything in the long run, because the dam is there for a different reason. But it was interesting to me that they were kind of winging it. They had to make decisions in the field about what they were going to dredge and where the water was supposed to go. And now I understand that project is wrapping up. They're going to stop doing that. They've done what they can do. And I guess at that point, I don't know who takes over, whether it's the city department or county or state park, I don't know. But there's got to be some kind of trail restoration and management of the park. But it was just interesting that some of these decisions are being made on the fly. And, I bet Ron would like to have those crews moved from the forest out to the beach to clear the debris there instead of dredging the dams. But it's just interesting to see this process happening in real time.
Yeah, I would be interested, and we'll probably reach out to the county and find out a little bit about what was going on there, and maybe I can follow up with you.
All right, so this is really where we want to, I think, take this. And I'm going to ask you a difficult question, maybe, but maybe it's the one that's on many of our minds. How long would you wait until you took your kids to the beach again? I think Oren sort of asked a question like this, but I sort of felt like I don't feel comfortable personally going there, at least in the burn zone, familiar beaches, and it's painful. I don't even want to look at it, frankly. I mean, it's very heartbreaking. Even almost 3 months after the fire, it doesn't look the same. And I know that the ocean heals itself, and eventually it'll look okay. But how long would you wait before you went back to the beach and brought your kids or friends or whatever?
Uh, it's hard to say without complete data set. I think based on the information we have right now, um, I would potentially feel comfortable bringing my kids to the beach to hang out in the dry sand area south of Montana Ave and Santa Monica Beach. Um, Again, that might change when we get the pH and PCV data from the sediment and sand this week, hopefully this week. Um, as far as getting into the water or walking near the beach, um, the physical hazards in the high tide and the wet sand area um, would make me a little bit nervous about bringing children around, particularly if they were going to be barefoot. And I think we need probably a couple more weeks, if not a month, to collect additional data to know really what's going on in the ocean. So, unfortunately, that's not a great answer. Um, this is really tough. This is unprecedented. We don't have data on what the baseline is in the ocean. So all of this new data that we're getting, there's nothing to compare it to other than potentially looking at, any health standards that exist. Um, and we don't have enough data over time to see trends and understand, you know, how long it's going to take for things to get better. So I think it's really challenging. What I can say is north of the burn area, looking at Surfrider Beach and Paradise Cove, those don't seem to be impacted. Generally, the currents flow south. So, north of based on the data from January, north of the burn area doesn't look to be impacted by fire contaminants. Down by Malaga Cove doesn't look to be impacted, so maybe stay in those areas if you want to get in the water. We don't have data for the South Bay. We are going to be encouraging Department of Public Health to add some South Bay sites because right now, because we have those spikes at Dockweiler and then what looks like, water that's not impacted at Malaga Cove, there's really no, it's hard to figure out what's going on between those two places. So the short answer is I can't answer that right now. We need some more data. And we have a great blog coming out tomorrow with kind of the state of the ocean, of what we know right now and what we're expecting in the coming weeks, and hopefully that'll answer a lot of folks' questions.
Well, we have to get you to give us that address and how we can follow what you're doing. I know Oren has a question or two before we close out, but this is obviously something we'll have to come back to because it is a changing situation. And it's interesting. I mean, I will say this just before I hand it over to Oren. I live in the area above the really good surf spot at Sunset and PCH. I don't think I've seen any surfers there. I'm obviously not living there now, but I go in almost every day. I don't think I've seen a single surfer, and it's sad. I think that's what I'm missing. It's just the sight of groups of people catching waves. I've learned to surf pretty badly, but I have learned since moving to the Palisades, since moving to Santa Monica, really. And it's just something we became so used to seeing. And one of the things on that mural in front of the high school is Tower 15, which became a really popular surfing spot over the last few years. I don't see people there either. So it's pretty sad. And hopefully we can get back to surfing there soon. But Oren, you had some questions as well.
Yeah, so I know a lot of like brands, sunscreen brands, especially that started in Malibu. It's because of like people that have been surfing over here and love this area. Wanted to make sure that the oceans are like stay clean for their kids, and their kids will be able to surf them. And I know a few friends and a few brands that like flew over to the Philippines to pick up the plastic in order to do the tube that they're going to use in their brands will be like PCR, post-consumer recyclable. And I know that these questions will rise. Is there anything that the community can do that like nobody's doing? And help cleaning this debris. I see people going on the beaches and like starting to pick up like nails and stuff. But is there any like sort of organization or something that people can like come as a community? You know, you can get like hundreds of people to come and help for this cause. Do you guys arrange something like this? Is there anything like this?
Yeah, we do monthly beach cleanups. They're called Nothing But Sand, and you can sign up and find out information on our website. We just started doing them again in March. So, we wanted to wait until we had some additional data to make sure it was safe. We do have some additional precautions that we recommend because the potential for exposure to contaminants. But yeah, check out our website, Heal the Bay. If there are companies that want to organize a specific one, we have a program called Suits in the Sand where we can organize a private cleanup for companies or anyone that they would like to invite, and that information is also available on our website. And we're really excited to be able to have data to understand the impact so that we can start these kinds of programs back up and start to get people back out on the beaches when it's safe. So yeah, if people want to get involved, they want to help clean up, check out our website, come join us for a beach cleanup. We have a lot of different opportunities to get involved, to help us do community science and protect our coast. We have an MPA watch program where we'll train you to go out and observe what's going on in our marine protected areas. A lot of different ways to get involved. And then one thing I just wanted to mention, because it's another thing that we did in response to the fires, Heal the Bay also runs the aquarium that's underneath the Santa Monica Pier. It's a place where we provide educational programming to over 10,000 kids a year, and we're currently caring for about 160 tidewater gobies. They're a federally endangered species that were rescued from Topanga Creek. And we recently became the second organization authorized to do a captive breeding program to make sure that once Topanga Creek is safe and healthy again, we can release them back into the creek. So it's something that we're really excited about, and if folks want to get involved and come volunteer at our aquarium, we're powered by volunteers, so there are a lot of opportunities for people to get involved.
All right. Well, I think that just about does it. But Tracy Quinn, thank you so much for being with us from Heal the Bay. And why don't you tell us once again the Instagram and other social media handles where you can follow what you're doing?
Well, first and foremost, check out our website, www.healthebay.org, and you can follow us on Instagram at Heal the Bay. And if you want some fun content, you can also follow our aquarium at Heal the Bay Aquarium, where you can get content on things like our semi-famous or famous endangered sea bass, gordita, and other fun content about some of the amazing Santa Monica Bay local native species that we have for you to interact with.
By the way, I really recommend that aquarium. It's amazing for little kids, especially. Grown-ups will enjoy it too, but my kids have all enjoyed going there. Thank you so much, Tracy Quinn. And from Ron, Oren, and myself, thank you all for listening. You can follow us at 3homelessguys.com. Email ideas, suggestions, complaints, comments, pod@3homelessguys.com. This is Joel Pollack and 3 Homeless Guys saying, stay strong.
Thanks for listening to 3 Homeless Guys. If this episode hit home, please subscribe to our channel. Check out 3homelessguys.com for RSS feeds to your favorite streaming service. Follow us on social and share this with a friend who needs to hear it. Drop us a review or shoot us a message at pod@3homelessguys.com. We'd love to hear from you. Stay strong, and we'll catch you next time.